Welcome to the Red Gauge Podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Kyle. This is Josh. Today we're joined by the... Oh, I didn't get a new adjective again. I've let myself down.
Fuck somebody
up.
Incorrigible is a good one.
Incorrigible John Johnson. Thank you for bailing me out. Like, comment, subscribe. It helps out the show a lot.
Yeah, YouTube and Instagram.
Yeah,
We're kicking butt on Instagram, falling behind on YouTube. Let's go.
help us out. We need a camera that's not all fish-eyed. All right. All right. Anyway, so John, how did you get into sport?
Well, I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and there really wasn't a lot to do back then besides either, misdemeanors or just some sort of sporting activity, sometimes a combination of both. So just like most people that grew up prior to, the explosion of media, social media especially, and technology, we played, we just played sports. And back then, you played, multiple sports throughout the season. You played baseball in the summer, and then maybe, you did football in the fall if you're a football player, soccer, basketball. So just we like to try a lot of different sports back then. I was particularly drawn to endurance sports, I think, even though I wasn't like an endurance athlete per se.
Yeah, I was gonna say you don't have a small frame. You're a pretty good sized guy.
I'm a pretty big guy. Actually, I shrunk. I used to be 6'3". Now I'm 6'2". I can't even when I just got my Florida driver's license when I moved down here, and I couldn't put 6'3" on there because I've been measuring my students on the wall, and I said, what am I now? I'm 6'2" even, so I'm sure I'll be below 6'2" soon, which which kind of stings a little bit. But I guess through time, especially if you have children, you get beat down a little bit, or if you teach, or you get compressed. So, anyways, yeah, I'm not a small guy. So I like to play basketball. Growing up, basketball and soccer were my favorite, definitely. And I was more of like I like playing in the low post. I like to rebound and things like that, things that a sizable guy would do. But I was interested in endurance. For one thing, I think it was because of the duration of the work required.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people that my brain is never really quiet. And I feel like endurance training especially helps me it's sort of meditative for me. And then from there, like things had a little more risk and focus, like maybe mountaineering or snowboarding and things like that, where you just had to kind of live in the moment over these long periods of time. Really helped me to, I figured out a lot of things, spending many, many hours like outside, training and things like that. But also it's made me a more peaceful person, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, many sports growing up. When I went into the Army, we had to run, and we had to run like a 2-mile PT test is what we called it then. And I enjoyed that. And I think we jumped in some 10Ks and things like that. So I kind of enjoyed that. And that was really my first taste of like endurance, training, because I wasn't a cross country runner in high school.
Right.
So as far as sport goes, in terms of like just my early development, it was just exposure to a lot of different things. Plus I had an older brother and I had friends that played sports, so, just getting banged around a lot on the basketball court and getting lots of concussions and things like that, and getting the wind knocked out of you, and just spending a lot of time, just being active outside. That was kind of my first exposure to sport. Like I mentioned, I went into the Army, and can I deviate from sport here, because some other stuff happened in the Army too. Yeah. So I joined the Army on a whim, kind of, sort of. I was in Northern California washing dishes, and I ended up washing dishes like 7 days a week. This is in the foothill of the Sierra Nevada. And it sucked. Washing dishes 7 days a week sucks. I had basically flunked out of college. I dropped out of high school, and I think I only probably completed my sophomore year of high school, and dropped out after that. I stayed till I was a senior, but it was kind of hit and miss. and got my GED. I had good skills. I had good skills because I like to read and I could write and things like that. And my math skills were decent. So I, passed the GED, no problem. Tried community college, just flunked out like after one quarter. And I like to party. Growing up, this is the other thing about growing up in the 70s. Besides doing a lot of different sports and things like that, just we like to party. And that sort of got the best of me. If just kind of sputtered to a start into adulthood, I would say, because of that. So ended up in Northern California washing dishes. Army recruiter was around the corner, and I'd always been curious about the world, and especially nature. And this kind of, I can tie this into endurance training and everything else as we go. But so I went around the corner like after my shift. This is at Pappy's restaurant where I was washing dishes, and I was like, where can I go? And they're like, well, take this test. I think it was called the ASVAB at that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, still
I
is.
got a really good score. Thankfully I have like at least an average IQ, and I got a decent score, so I didn't have to. And I have no, trust me, I have ultimate respect for the grunts, but that wasn't my only option, being a grunt. So I got into like a communications job. But anyways, I ended up getting orders. My first orders after training was for West Germany at the time. So Frankfurt, West Germany. So I went to West Germany, got there in 1988. A year later, we're at the frickin' Berlin Wall, like breaking pieces off of the Berlin Wall when I'm there. And as I said, I like to party when I was a young person. So of course we tied all this in to a big party at the time. But all this crazy stuff happened when I was in Europe. First, the Berlin Wall comes down. Communism fell. The Eastern Bloc basically fell while we were there. Soviet Union went away, which is why we were in Western Europe in the first place, to keep the Soviets from invading Western Europe through the Fulda Gap. And so that went away. Germany reunified. And here's the thing about Germans, they like to party too. So when Germany reunified, huge party. Germany won the World Cup when I was there. This was like one of the best, coolest sporting events I've ever watched. It was in Italy, the World Cup at that time. Germany won. If I recall, they won 2-1. It was a really good game. We were in a town, in a pub called a guest house. And everyone there is watching, and then they won. Everyone just poured out onto the streets. It's super cool experience to be there for that. And so all that stuff went down. Our reason to be in Western Europe kind of went away, but then Desert Storm happened. So all of us in Germany, we got sent down to Desert Storm. That was a whole other experience in Desert Storm. And I saw some crazy stuff down there, definitely, that has impacted me. A lot of it was around the civilians. Like, because part of my unit, we were sort of involved in civil affairs. So civil affairs people, they have to like manage the civilian, like just chaos that's created. Like when you're getting bombed and things, it just you can imagine like your hometown just getting bombed. There's a lot of chaos. There's a lot of civilians displaced. So that was pretty wild. And all the prisoners of war. And the other thing is, that's the only time I beat a video game, because it was such a short conflict. In order to move units from like Europe to the Middle East, it just takes time. So there was just a lot of sitting and waiting. So they had set up these mill vans, and I bought a Game Boy, a Nintendo Game Boy, like a first generation. It came with Tetris. And I think I picked up Super Mario Land, and I was actually, and I don't even like video games really, guys, but I sat around at a fire station in Saudi Arabia, because we'd gone through Iraq and Kuwait and all this stuff. Came back to Saudi Arabia, sitting there waiting for our turn to get on a plane, essentially, and get our stuff on a train. And I sat around long enough to beat Super Mario Land on the Game Boy. And that's the only video game I've ever beaten in my life. And that's what it took. It took that.
I gotta tell you, man, that's quite the roller coaster. Like, I'm sitting there trying to put myself in your shoes and imagining, like, what does it feel like to take apart the Berlin Wall? And I'm like, I feel like I'd be a little bit like a kid with free access to the cookie jar, where I'd be like, is this really happening? Are we
Yeah, it's
really doing this
wild,
right
man.
now?
It's wild stuff, and I tell you because I was always a history buff, and now just thinking back at all the stuff that we kind of saw, and by the when 1988, it really hadn't been that long, relatively, since World War II had ended.
Mm-hmm.
So the older adults there were alive during World War II, and they were pleased to have us there. The younger people, they didn't really like us there as much, because they weren't around. But still, I was stationed in Stuttgart. We leveled Stuttgart in World War II. Stuttgart was almost wiped out,
Mm-hmm.
by us and probably the Royal Air Force. But yeah, just wild. There was like a huge mountain outside of Stuttgart that used to be Stuttgart that they just moved all the rubble, and piled it up. Forget what it was called, but
I never noticed this, John, but you are Forrest Gump. You live that crazy
That's
war
funny.
stories. We're gonna get to where Forrest goes on that run. You're gonna talk about a
I tell
walk
you,
that you
man.
did across America.
I met this girl once, and she said the same thing, except for she said, "You're like Forrest Gump, except for not dumb." And I was like, "Well, stick around, because I'm liable to do something dumb soon."
Yeah, I just can't imagine going from that, like, taking apart the Berlin Wall and feeling like the future's happening to going to Iraq and having to support civilian families and stuff and just like having your guts ripped out,
How about and the Germans liked to party.
Yeah, yeah.
Not a famous party country, Iraq.
Yeah. So yeah, so that was kind of the early. That's kind of my early life, and I've taken a lot of turns. But to get back to sport, growing up, this is before. I'll just step back a little bit. We'll talk about just being outside and getting on the trails and being in the mountains and things like that. So I think I'm grateful for this, because I feel like I've been able to honor my true nature as a human. You think about a couple of generations ago, and we were basically just part of nature, and everything that we ate came out of nature. All of our building materials were provided by nature. They still are, but we've been removed by lots
we're
of
several steps away, right?
yeah,
in the
lots of
process.
middlemen now and things like that. So for me, I just feel like I'm so at home being in nature, and the trails in like the state of Washington, I was exposed to these wonderful trails we have. Of course, I'm down here in the southeast now, in North Florida. I tell people where I'm from. I'm like from the state of Washington. Of course, you have to say the state of Washington. It's very far away. It's like if you look at the map, it's literally, when I tell my students, it's as far away as you can get. I could go to Key West, and I almost went to Key West this year. And I'll get back to that. I didn't get the job, but it's far away as you can get. It's like another country essentially.
Uh-huh.
And so when I tell people where I'm from, they're like, "Oh, it's just beautiful." I heard it's beautiful up there. I went there, I visited. It's like beautiful. I said, "Yeah, you're right. It's beautiful up there for sure." So just the beauty of the state of Washington, especially Western Washington, with the mountains and all the trails. Definitely was inspired by just being out there on those from an early age. I got lucky. I had a early mentor that was into it. He worked for Olympic National Forest and loosely through the Boy Scouts. He kind of turned me on, and he took us all on some trips, and it was like, wow, I was like, this is pretty amazing. And I found that I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the endurance challenge, especially the physical challenge, because getting to some of these places is, it takes a lot of gumption
Mm-hmm.
to get to some of these backcountry places. You're talking about a lot of climbing and a lot of miles and hot weather, cold weather, things like that. And I found that I actually was able to embrace that. I heard somewhere someone said alpinism. Alpinism's kind of like mountain climbing, but not using siege tactics. So it's basically you and your partner, a couple of partners, and you try to pare down your gear to the very, very minimum. Whether you're digging a snow cave instead of having a tent, or you have a bivy sack instead of a full-on mountaineering tent, just so you can go fast. So the idea is to go fast, because when you're in the mountains, a lot of the danger is you can't control. And the longer you're exposed to the elements up there, like rock fall and lightning and things like that, the more dangerous it becomes. So the faster you move, the safer you are. In order to move fast, you got to be fit. So I can tie this into endurance and fitness. But I heard someone say that's like the art of suffering, and I really sort of embrace that, like at some level, like a long time ago, where it was like, wow, I actually enjoy suffering to some degree, and I like doing hard things. So
it's funny that you had a good ASVAB score, so you avoid being a grunt. Like as a grunt, I'm letting you know, your whole damn life you've just been a grunt. Like everything but your time in the military, like enjoying the suck, packing crap around for a long time. Like that's just been the time in the military.
I'll tell you. All I'm saying is I guess I've always had options. The only reason I mentioned that is just because I had options besides 11 Bravo or 11 Mike. But
you did something different.
Dude, I have so much, and this is on another. I have so much gratitude for all the dudes that like have taken a bullet and given their life. It's just, and I teach about all that gratitude to all my students, and that have been in all my classes. I talk about to them about all that stuff. So I do like to grunt, definitely. This is interesting. When you grunt or scream, I know this is a tangent, but I heard that I had liberty to do this, and I'll get back to hiking in a sec. When you grunt or scream, I was just reading about this. Probably saw a tweet or something. You actually are able to express or generate more power. And I know, Kyle, this as a thrower. It's like, and both of you guys, like in your realm, it's the same with lifting heavy stuff. Lifting heavy stuff. When it's genuine, not when you like just scream because you want to like draw attention to yourself that you're lifting heavy shit or whatever, but grunting and screaming actually makes you stronger and more powerful. So I guess being a grunt is, an expression of strength and power. So I'm just a rimp. I'm just a rimp. But you don't know what that stands for, right?
No.
A rimp is a rear echelon motherfucker. That's what a rimp is. Yeah. But so getting back to just being outside, so my scoutmaster is like 50 milers or whatever. Well, eventually we get to the Cascades, and we were climbing mountains and stuff too, right? Like I think I climbed Mount Eleanor. I was like 11 years old, so I've been climbing that mountain for many years. But then we got into the Cascades, started climbing some bigger mountains, got onto the Pacific Crest Trail. So the Pacific Crest Trail is a long trail, and it took quite a few years to actually establish this trail. Well, in this country, we have something called the National Scenic Trail System. This is an act of Congress saying, look, we have these routes in this country that are historic and scenic, and they're significant. We need to protect these. So Congress said we're going to create this trail system. So the Appalachian Trail, of course, is the oldest national scenic trail in the country, and the Pacific Crest Trail runs from Campo, California, which is on the Mexican border down there, up to Manning Park, British Columbia. So it runs all the way through California, Oregon, and Washington, essentially on the crest of any mountain range that's there. And there's quite a few actually mountain ranges. You don't get the Cascades until you get up to around Lassen Peak in Northern California. That's where the Cascade Range starts, the chain of volcanoes. So there's many other scenic trails too. The last one I was on was the Arizona Trail, and that was during COVID. When they said, this is the thing about COVID, they were like, all right, everyone stay home. My first inclination was like, well, no, no, I'm not going to stay home. Actually, it's like, that's really not what I want to do. So I ended up getting out a little bit during COVID, including down there. But uh, yeah, so the Pacific Crest Trail, once I set foot on that, my scout was like, well, it goes from Mexico to Canada. He was like, I want to do that. That's what I told myself, and I said it right there out loud. I was like, I want to do that, definitely. So back then, just growing up, I was probably 15 at the time. Well, like a year later, I convinced my mother to drive me up to Stevens Pass and drop me off. And I said, I'm going to hike the Snoqualmie Pass. It's 78 miles through the Alpine Lakes Wilderness. So beautiful, you guys. Alpine Lakes Wilderness is one of the most beautiful places, definitely in the American West. So somehow I convinced my mother to do this, to drop me off up there solo.
Always a good idea.
Yeah, well, I think the way she recounts it is like it was safer than letting you stay here with your friends or something like that,
Yeah,
or
she knew you liked
stay
to
in
party.
town with your friends. So, I had the gear and stuff, she drops me off, and I was like, well, I guess it will take me like a week or something to get there. I'll just call you on the payphone, collect when I get to Snoqualmie Pass. So, but anyways, it only took me like 3 days. So I cranked out like a marathon a day, in my big boots and my pack, and so that was my first exposure to like a long trail like that. Anyways, fast forward to like 20 years ago now, and ended up being in between jobs. When I say in between jobs, it means I literally quit my job to go do this. That's what I mean by in between jobs. And
How old were you when you started?
I was 30. I'm 56 now, so I guess I was 35. 35. So, yeah, so I quit my job, which reminds me of a great quote by a friend of mine that I always, share. It's, I never had a job I quit too soon. And that's actually been true in all the jobs I've quit, with the possible exception of one. But the jury's still out on that. But so I quit my job and I got into public education right when I got back from that trip. Quit my job, flew down, started walking on the Pacific Crest Trail. At that time, it was information was still a little bit hard to come by. When I was growing up reading about it, there's only a couple of books out there on it. So I had those books, because I read a lot growing up when I was a kid. There was a couple guidebooks now published on the Pacific Crest Trail 20 years ago. Internet was new. It was like a listserv, where there was an email listserv. I think if I remember that's what it was called. So there was some information getting out, but it was still pretty rare for people to through hike that. And a lot more people attempt it now. I'm not sure if they finish. More people finish probably. They got popular because some woman had a midlife crisis and wrote a wonderful book about healing, while hiking on that trail. For me personally, like a couple years prior to that, I'd given up alcohol completely. I know I talked about partying growing up.
Mm-hmm.
So like tomorrow will be 24 years since I drank alcohol.
Yeah, congratulations.
Good job.
Yeah, and thank you. And it's like, I'm sure everyone would thank me, actually. They'd be the ones saying, they'd be like, thank you for not drinking alcohol anymore. So no, it's like, but I am grateful because if in terms of like longevity and like just the physical body, I can't really think of too many things that are worse than alcohol.
Yeah.
Besides
Oh, yeah.
maybe, just continuous head trauma, maybe, and things like that. But definitely like has enhanced my life, just not drinking alcohol over the years. And hopefully I can, hopefully it'll pay off like in terms of longevity and vitality.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
So
sure it already is. Like, alcohol is such a big part of our culture, but it's like
yeah,
it drives up your risk factors for everything. Like, there's no goodness from it, you know.
yeah, that's like, and I never preach about it, and I'm fine. Actually, down here, it's like I go listen to music at the bar or whatever, or just hang out with people, or go to get food. So there's no judgment there, but just for me, it's like I can't think of anything worse to put in my body, and a lot of other people would agree with that.
Drinks the water. It's like he's been
Yeah.
selling water this whole time.
His new water
You
company.
go onto my page, John
So
Johnson Water.
yeah, but the reason I brought that is because I had quit alcohol, before that. So I was like, all right, I quit alcohol. I'm going to quit this job. I'm going to go do this thing I wanted to do. And I'd done some other long distance hiking too, but this trip was awesome in a couple different ways. One, it made me realize how little I actually needed to be happy, basically just to be happy, like much little stuff. Because I started out with more stuff than I ended up with. Because as I went in California, it just doesn't rain. I had this nylon shelter, like a tarp. I mailed that thing to the Columbia River, so I went 1,000 miles without a tarp. I went 1,000 miles without pants. No pants.
Just Winnie the Pooh in it.
No, I had a pair of running shorts, one
I
pair of
know.
running shorts,
John
and a
likes to
shirt.
party.
So I had one pair of running shorts, a shirt. I went through 5 pairs of shoes, a couple pairs of socks. I did have a sweater that I still have, and I had a sock hat because I would sleep in it. We're talking about summer in California, even in the mountains. Thunderstorms are a risk, but in my experience, that summer at least, they were all dry thunderstorms, so dry lightning, which is a risk. There, I mean, if I could tell you how many days I swore I would never hike on a high mountain ridge in a lightning storm, it was like, this is the last time. It's like, God, just let me make it across this ridge without getting struck by lightning. And I'll find myself doing it the exact same thing the next day. But so I had a pair. So I had these shorts, and I'd just be out in the sun. So they all got UV damaged, right? So they used to be black shorts, and they're like purple and gray and everything. So the funniest part was like, by the time I got to Lake, so I started in Mexican border. By the time I got to Lake Tahoe, South Lake Tahoe, I want to say it's, God, I don't know, 1,700 miles, maybe. The whole trail's 2,600 and change. And I heard you guys talking about the 26.2 sticker. I always wanted to get a sticker that said 2,658.7. But people would be like, what the hell?
People would have no idea. Like, what
What
is
is this?
this?
What is this? I don't like those stickers either, because I feel anyone can cover 26.2 before they. I mean, there's people doing it after the race, after the organizers go home. The cops left. There's no one, they're still out there. So
Yeah.
it's a challenge. It's a long ways to go, but anyone can do it in a day. You might be just wrecked. If you're out of shape doing that, you just be wrecked the next day. But anyways, getting back to South Lake Tahoe, I show up South Lake Tahoe emaciated, essentially. You simply cannot get enough calories in, because I was averaging, some days I was hitting almost 40 miles a day.
Yeah.
Some days were harder. I think I averaged like a marathon every day for 105 days or something. That includes rest days. So I roll into South Lake Tahoe emaciated, weighing like 175 probably, which is pretty lean for me. It's like the leanest I've ever been. But UV damaged. All I had was shorts, UV damaged running shirt, running shorts. Walked into Caesar's Palace in South Lake Tahoe to the buffet. There's like fat families, just like, I'm just in there. I just consumed, prime rib. They're all looking at me. I'm like stinky. Like I literally look like some sort of just homeless
Woods
dude.
man.
Huh? Yep. So I just consumed till I couldn't anymore. Walked back to this hotel where I was going to sleep that night. And on my way back, bought a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream, threw my one pair of shorts and my shirt in the wash, wrapped myself in a towel, and just ate Ben and Jerry's there. So I started like trying to get more calories in after that. I think that's the point where it stopped being healthy.
Yeah.
Just like everything else, it's like there's a point where it's healthy, and then you reach a point where it's just isn't healthy anymore. So, but thankfully, I like to embrace the suck, as Josh put it. So I was able to keep walking. And by the time I got to Washington, it really hadn't rained from Mexico to Snoqualmie Pass. That's how far I got before it rained. It was like sunny every day with a few thunderstorms thrown in. One time, I think only one time I had to roll up in my poncho. That was my shelter. I rolled up like a burrito in a poncho one night because it started to, spit a little rain. But when I got to Snoqualmie Pass, it started raining, and I got trench foot. I was
Oh,
hiking through the Alpine Lakes Wilderness where I'd hiked when I was a 16-year-old kid when my mom dropped me off, and I couldn't get my feet dry. There was brush was wet, everything was wet, and my foot just got raw and started just weeping sores, just like so that really sucked. The last, I don't know, from I guess the last few hundred miles were really tough, but at that point it was like, not gonna quit at
Yeah,
that
you
point.
can't make it that far.
yeah.
Then you got to do it again.
So that's that was an awesome trip because I realized how little I needed. And then this is the other thing that was interesting about that trip is we're social animals, and I soloed this. There was other people out there, and I like formed loose association with a couple people. But if you have a family, and you miss those people for a while, and then you don't anymore, which is that was my experience. You don't miss them as much. It's sort of like when someone dies, where it's like very intense. The emotion's intense up for a while, and then it sort of isn't as intense anymore. So I found that, of course, I loved my family still, but I wasn't finding myself like missing them anymore. I was just more happy with where I was that day in the moment. There's really no stuff. So it was a good psychological exercise for me, also, for
Yeah.
sure.
Can I share the story of the longest trail hike I've ever done?
Sure.
All right. So, John, you probably know this hike. It's in the Olympic Mountains, and it's the Hoh River to Glacier Meadows. It's about 26 miles round trip, right? Did we tell this? Is that what you were talking about, the 26.2? Have I already told the story?
You've talked about it, yeah, and
Yeah.
you busted up.
Yeah. We made it 8 miles
You're
in.
like,
and
I
was
can't
like,
go anymore.
I can't do it, you guys. We gotta turn around. I'm so busted up. But yeah, that was my long trail. That's the longest, 16 miles. That's
What
the
is,
most I've ever done in a day.
what about you, Josh? Wait, this isn't my
Uh,
podcast. I shouldn't be
no,
asking the
no,
questions.
you
Oh
asked us
yeah,
questions.
that's
I don't
fine.
know that I've
Yeah.
done any long. I thought I was training for the Boston Marathon, uh, but it was the year that there was the bombing. So
Yep.
I was trying to do the marathon after the bombing, and then the bombing took place, and everything on all the forums were like, it does not matter if you hit the Boston Marathon times like that, because they only take so many. Those times
Because
are going to be
everyone wanted to
driven.
go the year after
Everybody
the
wanted to
bombing.
go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like in that training, I had gotten up to 16 miles. Like that's probably the longest, besides like I guess in the military,
So what you're
20,
saying is
20
we
mile
were
ruck march, but that's not anything impressive. That's all punishment. You know what I mean? There's no point of a ruck march where you start off, you're like, this is beautiful. It's from the first step, you're like, fuck this. This is stupid.
So what you're saying is that our endurance records are actually tied. Both did 16 miles.
No, I did 17. Well, I've done 20 in the mile. I've done 20 in the Army multiple times.
So
But
that Hoh River Trail, and
he's going to say it's 21 miles.
it's longer. I put a comment on your podcast. You said someone comment if you know. I did. So you should read your comments and give me a little heart.
John, I'm trying. We're blowing up so goddamn fast.
I
It's
know you
hard.
guys.
man.
Hey,
We're great. We
this is
really
what I
did
love
like-
about you guys. You guys are putting in the work.
Oh, yeah.
That is, of course, that's what works, right? Hard work works.
Yeah. That's been our experience our entire lives, so we're just doubling down on it.
It's because it's true. It's everyone's experience if they ever delve into that. If they ever
Yeah.
delve into hard work, it's like it always works.
It's funny that you actually say that because Cofield knows this because I talk about it all the time. Like, there's like my biggest fear is that I'm missing someone's comment.
Uh-huh.
I really want to be someone that's like engaged and commenting back and everything. And like, I'm like, God, just the tools aren't good enough.
Yeah.
I need to find the comments. And then you said you commented. I'm like, God damn it.
Anyway, you were saying about the Hoh River Trail?
Yeah. So what a beautiful trail. People come from all over the world to hike that trail.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
like-
it was
it's like
stunning.
it's a world treasure. You keep going to Glacier Meadows, which is it's the end of the Blue Glacier on Mount Olympus.
Hmm.
That's the approach to Mount Olympus. And climbing Mount Olympus is one thing that sort of got me, because I'd been doing some mountaineering. After I got back from that trip, I was doing more and more mountaineering. I picked up a climbing buddy and we started to climb things in the Olympics, climbed all the Cascades, volcanoes, um, except Shasta. I didn't make it to the summit of Shasta. Turned around on that. But anyways, the blue went to climb Mount Olympus with two other guys, and beautiful hike, Glacier Meadows, hiked up there. So when you finally get to the summit block, it's a glaciated climb, so you get the summit block of Mount Olympus, and the rock is just shitty. And I found myself, and at this point, I had, my son Will was pretty young, and my son Will, Kyle, you had him in class. You guys
Oh
know
yeah,
what
I
I'm
love
talking
Will
about.
to death. He's a great kid. Well, he's not a
Yeah,
kid
he
anymore.
loved you too.
Yeah.
I wish. Oh, the thing about Will, I don't want to say this about Will, but I'm going to tell this funny story about him because he took the SAT, and I think this was after he took your math class. But
Uh-huh.
I was like, so what? And he got a score back. He's like, I said, what'd you score on the SAT? He said 1000. I was like, 1000. It's like, you mean 1000? Which I don't know if you know, but 1000 isn't a very high score, but I've never heard anyone call it 1000 until then. So I know he got his number sense from Mr. Cofield's math class.
Yep, had to have been me. Had to have been me. I'll
Oh,
make
you
up
guys,
for it.
he's a smart kid.
Hmm.
But anyways, I know we're far enough into the podcast where you'll never watch this because his generation, they'll make it like their podcasts need to be 20 seconds so they can
Yeah.
go. They need shorts.
Yeah,
They need
I'll make sure
shorts.
to make
Yeah,
that a short.
this
Yeah,
one will be a
exactly.
short. Yeah.
But so yeah, so that's when I sort of dialed back on the mountaineering because me and my friend were climbing. It seemed like harder and harder stuff all the time, and getting in decent shape and wanting to climb harder stuff. But I remember like hanging out on the sketchy, like basically hanging out over air, 100 feet of air to the glacier. That's enough though to kill someone,
Yeah, plenty.
and unprotected because you couldn't protect it because the rock was so shitty. I might have been on the wrong route, but I just remember the hold was loose, and I needed to like pull down on that hold to get to the top, and I did, and said, okay, I'm not going to do this anymore after this.
Yeah.
And at that point, I sort of dialed it back, and I got more into. That's when I kind of got into trail running. At that
Yeah,
point,
which you were pretty good at.
so trail running, and that sort of, and then that I got into public education at the same time. So really, that sort of was the impetus to get into like endurance training.
Hmm.
For those things. I just love being on the trail. And if I talked about wanting to move fast in the mountains, so when you're fit, you have access to a lot of places. People would have to hike 3 days. You can run there in the morning.
Hmm.
You can see it and then get out of there. But so after that, I just kind of got more into trail running and still enjoy that quite a bit. Trail running. Did some good runs.
I don't know if you even remember this, but it's actually one of my favorite stories to tell, and it was from my brother. And he was on a multi-day hike by himself, and he got injured. I can't remember, he like busted up his ankle or his leg or something. And he said, he was like, dude, he was way out in the middle of nowhere, just by himself, no way to contact anybody. And a man comes running down the trail. I don't even know if you remember this, but it was you. Like, you might not even have known it was him, but it was you just running. Like, he was multi-days out, and you were just on a run, and you ran back and got assistance, and then never
Oh
even
yes.
came back.
No.
And they came back and got him, and it's like, he just felt so sad because he was on a multi-day hike, and you just came running in like shorts and a t-shirt past the same mark.
Was that on the Duckabush?
It was probably
Duckabush. So I came up with something called the duck to skoke.
Okay.
So
That's not a short distance.
I always love maps, so you're always looking for loops. But duck to skoke is like a perfect like 55K trail
Perfect.
run. So I think I created a Facebook page. I created an event and convinced some people to do it, and it was fun. That's a fun one. You go up the Duckabush and then you ford the upper Duckabush River, which can be sketchy because there's no like bridge up there.
Right.
And then up to Home Sweet Home and then over First Divide, then down into the North Fork Skoke. It's a great loop. That's like 33 miles. I convinced, I charged people admission to like raise money for the cross country team one
Yeah.
year, and like 6 people showed up. It was awesome. Willow Shanahan was one of them.
Oh
She's a
yeah, I love
Shelton.
Willow.
She's a Shelton kid. Yeah,
She was my neighbor.
yeah. What? Oh, did you live at Hartstein or is
Oh
this?
yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
Yeah, what a cool. I love that entire family, or at least the ones that I've met. Which
Yeah,
is
yeah.
so. Yeah, so that was the Duck to Skoke is a great one. There's some other good loops too that we've done up there. The thing about and then an offshoot of that was I started the Beast of Big Creek Trail Race. So I don't know if you guys know about this trail race.
No.
It's still going on. So I started this in 2011, and you run from Big Creek. Well, some people run. The race goes from the Big Creek campground, which is at Lake Cushman essentially,
Right.
and there's a wonderful trail built by a lot of Shelton guys, the Mount Rose Trail crew. Some of them are dead now, but it goes all the way up to the summit of Mount Eleanor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then back. So I started a trail race. There's like a European style trail race. So Europeans are very into like, if you live in the Alps, like we're going to race to the top of the mountain and back and see who the badass really is, because on that trail, hiking and starting to run a little bit, you see the old timers like, oh, what's my record is blah, 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 running up there and down, and so I was like, I got to find out what people can do as like European style trail race. So I started doing that race and started to get pretty big actually. I had like the North Face sponsoring it. They were demoing shoes there and a couple hundred people showed up and it got big enough where people were complaining about it. The Karens were out complaining about it. Oh, there's people running on the trail and all this stuff. So I dialed it back a little bit, but that's still going on. Someone else took it over when I stopped doing it.
And
But
that
it's
one's
just a
not terribly long, right? It's a real big elevation increase, but not a
14.
super.
It's like 14 miles, but it's a vertical mile again in 14
Yeah, yeah.
miles.
So obviously, if you're not from around here, you're not going to understand. But like, how far? I don't know how far Big Creek is to the farthest you could drive before hiking Eleanor. That upper parking
Yeah.
lot, but I don't even like that from the upper parking lot to the
It's a
top of
tough climb. It's a
Eleanor.
beautiful climb, but it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I can't even
Olympics-
imagine
The
starting.
Olympics
from
are
the
really
bottom.
steep. The Olympics are steep, coming from sea level on that side. It's just like, this is world class. As I said, it's like a European. The only thing different from the Beast of Big Creek race that's still going on, like the big Europe mountain races is, in Europe, the entire town would be out just hammered, smoking cigarettes, ringing cowbells as you're running,
running 'em up.
smacking you on the ass when you're running by. So, but it's a cool event, but if you look at, and so when I started training athletes in terms of when I started coaching cross country
When
and
did you
running
start
with my
coaching?
kids and training myself, just taking into account the mountains nearby and the terrain and things like that, it just became a huge part of just trying to create some sort of not just really good training, but just injecting like a lot of joy and suffering into their lives because that's a big part of the sport too, is the suffering part. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. When did you
Learning.
start coaching? When was your first season?
I started coaching I started coaching the junior high track team in like 07 or 08 maybe.
Okay.
So I've actually only been coaching and I'm still coaching track. I'm going to coach track here this year. We had our inaugural cross country season here, which I coached that in the fall. In terms of interscholastic competition in the county, they just brought that on this year. But so I think I've been coaching for, what is that, 17 years or so? 17 years.
Yeah, cross country is a great sport. That's another one. We talk a lot about one of the joys of helping out in the weight room is that you can do the weight room for the rest of your life. Like it's it's accessible, it's affordable. There's weight rooms everywhere. You can lift weights. Cross country is kind of the same thing. You don't have to do a punishing amount of miles to get all the health benefits and participate and enjoy being outside and get good quality exercise and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I could feel us. We're about to transition into that second half here. So
Okay.
I think this is the perfect spot for Monroe's random ass question.
Okay.
Cue the music, John. I think by the time yours comes out, I'm going to have some music going. It'll look real stupid if I don't, but the music is going now. I hope we like it.
For some period of time.
For so 5 to 10 seconds. I don't know. But I want to get this because it fits more into in the 70s. I liked to party. I feel like more than where we're about to go. And that's favorite band or artist. Who is your favorite band or artist?
Musical art.
Who's going first?
I mean,
feels like. I mean, I know what my favorite
I
band.
Go
already
ahead.
know
Okay. Tool.
the
Like-
band Tool.
yeah,
I could've
yeah,
told you that.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
Cofield's a big Tool head.
Big Tool. Big
I've
giant
seen that.
Tool.
Cofield's a huge Tool.
I can see that.
Man.
Here's the
Yeah.
thing, like I had this is kind of funny, but it was probably like second or third grade. I had 2 favorite bands, all right? And I feel like this was when it was a life choice I made without ever realizing it. The 2 bands were
Destiny's Child.
No,
and
it was-
Slipknot.
the very close. It was the Backstreet Boys and Korn,
Yeah.
all right? And they're both killing it
Uh-huh.
at that time, all right? And I decided probably through,
Peer pressure.
toxic masculinity
Right.
that I was going to go the Korn route. God damn, I'm glad I went to the Korn route.
Do you want to
So
hear?
Korn is my favorite band. Of
You
all
want to hear a funny story about that?
time. I don't even know of what I said. They could be going off 3 different tangents there, but sure.
So
yeah.
just talking about changes in taste, right?
Yeah.
Like I was really into classical music as a kid.
That tracks.
I mean, if you draw a Venn diagram of like people who love metal and people who love classical music, there's a big overlap. It's just people who like drama. You know what I mean? We're just dramatic at heart. But I took a really bad fall in a basketball game. I actually like spiderweb fractured the side of my skull and everything. And like the next time that I had an opportunity to listen to music, I put on some classical music and I was like, this just sounds like trash and I hate it. And it was all metal after that. So like that head injury shifted my gears from, like oldies and classical music to metal just overnight.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I also was just a right asshole to everybody in my life for like 3 months. And everybody's like, oh, moody teenagers. I never even went to the doctor. I didn't find out that I broke my skull until like 5 years later.
Severe concussion.
Yeah. I went to the doctor like 5 years later, and he was like, well, let's make sure you don't have a brain tumor because I was having headaches all the time. Puts the films up on the board, and he's like, when did you break your skull? And I was like, had to have been that basketball game. Had to have been. And then he was like, what about the other one? So I had
Had
more
the
than
quarry
one.
already happened?
Yeah.
For fans of the show.
The quarry had already
I'm
happened.
going to say it was the fucking quarry.
It might have been. No, it was the basketball game. It was the
Quarry
basketball for
dive.
sure. I was so messed up after I hit my head in that basketball game that I didn't realize that my elbow was dislocated for like 4 hours.
All right, John. So this is one thing we're gonna get is a picture of like maybe like the what is it, Da Vinci's
Yeah.
man there, and just
Vitruvian man.
every
Yeah, you need a
spot.
whiteboard. On a whiteboard,
every-
you need to just
I
draw
would love to because right now I should be
spiderweb
going
fracture.
like skull fracture and just track Cofield's injury history.
Love it.
Yeah.
Fucking ridiculous, dude.
So anyway,
good
it was Tool. No, it wasn't even Tool after that. It was Tool. It wasn't Tool for a couple of years, but it was definitely metal.
Yeah, so the leading cause of death amongst young men is accidental death. So, dude, that's how it happens. It's like
Yeah.
you're just built to last, though.
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah, he's flirted with it a couple of
Well,
times.
Yeah.
I think back about that. There was like a solid 3 weeks where like I couldn't get my head under the shower. Like I would go to take a shower, and like as the water would start getting closer to my neck, I'd start having like a panic attack, and I could only sleep on my right side. And like I probably
Yeah,
was
swelling.
doubly lucky in that I just didn't just die.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do?
Yeah, it'd make this podcast way weirder.
Cofield's dead body. you just got
Skeleton.
a 14-year-old dead body just hanging out. Well, I mean, the dead body of a 14-year-old boy.
We have a skeleton by now. So,
Yeah.
John, what was your favorite band?
It's one of those questions, man. I just don't like those questions. It's hard. Those are hard to pin down. Music's such a huge part of my life. and it has been for a long, long time. Right now it's Guntown, which is that's Will Johnson's band. My son Will Johnson. He just dropped another
Pretty good
demo on
answer.
Spotify. So
I'm
for
gonna add
me,
it to
it's
my list.
gosh, you know, I got into reggae music when I was like 15 years old, and it just has stuck with me ever since. I listen to a lot of reggae music. I go to a lot of reggae concerts, but also I also grew up in the 70s, so you know, album and hard rock is a big part of my life too. So I like so much music. It's hard to pin down. It's like when someone says, you know, what's your favorite movie or what's your favorite book
That's
or whatever. It's just
the
like
very first one I talk about. Like I panic. Like I'm gonna offend the band I don't name. Like they
Yeah.
somehow give a shit that I didn't say their name or their movie. But yeah, I do the same
I'll
thing.
say this about music. It's just amazing. For one thing, music is like a miracle because a lot of the people I listen to, they're dead now, you know, but they're still alive. The music keeps them alive. But then when you listen to some music during a certain part of your life, and then maybe you put it down and move on to something else or whatever. Whenever you hear that music again, whether it's a song or an album or whatever, it just like brings you back to there. There's just a lot of emotion tied into music, and you know the brain is just amazing when it comes to music. How it can just bring you right back. And to be honest with you, you know, sometimes music makes me cry or makes me remember stuff that I didn't think I would remember or stuff like that. So yeah, music's huge for sure. I don't know who my favorite is. I just don't know.
Yeah, a lot. Like you said, a lot depends on what's the mood, what's my mood. Like
Yeah.
I don't even know if I could give you a favorite genre.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the '90s alternative, like you will call it rock, but really it's like ballads and soft. Like I probably go to
Mhm.
that a lot. Uh, but new
Yeah, I
metal.
was just listening to Bare Naked Ladies.
Oh yeah, they would fit into that.
So, and I was like, wow, that's a banger. You know, I played it twice. I was like, you know what? There's it's just like a lyric is like something about I'm a little bit rusty or something, but yeah, do
So
feel a
that's
little
gonna be
bit
the title
rusty.
for this episode.
Yep.
Oh, it's all
John Johnson, Bare Naked Ladies are a banger.
right.
Yep. Hey, I don't
They
know.
did work. They had an album. They did some work. I liked their
I
stuff.
was just something about it. Just was like I heard it and I was like, wow, I haven't heard this one in 30 years.
Yeah,
Let's play
I'm
it
not
again.
complaining. I had that. I had one of their albums. I listened to it till it wore out when I was young.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they weren't that good, but
I love music
I
though.
so I grew up pretty poor though. So like if I got an album, that's what you did. You just listened to it till it wore out, and then you get
yeah,
something.
what I did was I just anytime I like 2 or 3 listens, then I
Mhm.
asked my butler to go get me a new one.
Yeah.
And he would go to the store, buy a new CD, and surprise me.
Yeah, it's funny too because I'm sure that if I went through like my collection, there'd be some in there where I have not listened to them since, but I probably listened to them 2,000 times because it was the only thing I had at the time.
Titanic soundtrack.
Yeah.
Just 'cause so, but so, like we're trying to get these podcasts to wrap. Like we have the brain, we have the idea, all right, of how this is helping wrestling. But I really feel like if a wrestler was like to start at episode 1, they'd be like, "I've been duped. This has nothing at all to do with wrestling." But why would you bring trail running, cross country, outdoors lover to talk about wrestling? And the thing is, because I've talked to you a long time, and I know that you not only endurance but like generating power and speed and things, like you have a depth of knowledge. You've taught yourself a lot, so that's kind of the way I want to go. The second half is like,
Cool.
even though it might not be 1 for 1, but if you're gonna shoot a single leg, like you need to generate the same type of first step as like a 100-meter runner, or you know what I'm saying, like that does cross over. So we are just wondering if we could
There's
kind of
many crossovers. It's like I think I heard this maybe a long time ago, but then again recently. It's like the big the important stuff, like the big rocks that you move, they happen sort of at the intersection of one discipline and another, where they sort of overlap. Rather than being like, this is what happened to me early on in coaching. I was like in a silo because that's what happens sometimes. Part part of it's my personality, part of it could be a lack of leadership in the organization or whatever, but people get in their own silos and do their thing. And when actually some amazing things would happen if they could somehow get a little closer, and like on the edges of those disciplines is where some really good stuff can happen, I think. So bringing things in like nature and psychology and philosophy into sport to me is it's just sort of a natural progression of things. Because let's face it, is like once you, if you're a technical coach, and you learn the X's and O's and everything else, that actually happens pretty quick,
Mm-hmm.
about how to train people, and things change, because what we used to think was true is no longer true, has been proven to be not true, and people change their minds and things like that. But I just forgot where my train of thought was. But I think just being in the silo and not seeing how things that are seemingly unrelated are actually very related is very powerful.
Yeah.
So I've tried to do that. I've tried to do that in coaching. What sort of I got into speed training not because I was coaching sprinters, but because I was coaching middle distance runners.
Right.
In high school, uh, the longest distance on the track is 3,200 meters, which is 3,000 meters in some high school states, but also in internationally and collegiately, 3,000 meters they run there, and then 5,000 meter cross country. These are really speed events, actually. If you look at they're not really in long distance endurance challenge. Like a half marathon is really kind of what I see as like one of the first, like, it's really an endurance challenge rather than a speed, more of a speed oriented event. So I was coaching these speed events, but I was like the people around me and some stuff that maybe I'd got, my own experience. I was training them more on the endurance side. So a lot of work, a volume of work that wasn't very intense. When in reality, the events are meant to be very intense events. So there's a huge speed component to those. So out of necessity, I started looking around and seeing what some of the very best coaches were doing with their athletes. And it didn't take long to reveal that just in every other sport, I'm sure there's a few where speed isn't the most important element to that sport. But I don't know what they are, because speed's important to just about every sport,
Uh-huh.
So by out of necessity, I started learning about sprint training and about power training. And eventually that led me to what for my events, for the middle of distance, elastic strength is a huge requirement, and it's a huge hallmark of the very best. The very best middle distance runners, they have a lot of elastic strength. So jumps training to me is like where this everything sort of led me to. So, which is plyometrics, essentially plyometrics. And I feel like plyometrics are so important to just every sport. What I've realized though was just like and this may have been your experience for you guys, is like I was getting these athletes that they lacked a lot in when it comes to motor learning.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So motor learning, I think, is something, and this has been fascinating to me recently, because I went from high school down to middle school. I'm teaching middle schoolers now, and I love it. I love these kids. I got a lot of really good, sweet kids, and it's such a fascinating. If you're into psychology and physiology, it's such a fascinating time to observe, like between the ages of 11 and 14 there. And what I see is now, I think the erosion of motor skills just continues to happen, and we all know, now kids they write with their thumbs, and it's like if I have 12-year-old kids that really their writing looks like something I would produce in kindergarten, just their handwriting. So motor skills was a huge one, because in order to get people stronger and work on that elastic strength and do jumps training, they got to be able to handle the load with,
Mhm.
proper movement patterns. which you guys know all about. I just found there was really just a lot of our kids are there's a lot of deficiencies when it comes to movement, at least the kids that I've always worked with. So for me, I started doing a lot of different kinds of movements with them, trying to improve that.
Yeah, it almost puts. I mean, it's always been a benefit for kids to get into at least some sport like early on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now I feel like that's just that gap is becoming more and more fast. Like a kid that like we talked about on our last one, with Spencer. Uh, if I'm getting a kid in ninth grade and he hasn't really, or he or she hasn't really done anything, it's going to take a little bit of time, depending on the athlete. Some learn quick, some don't. But there's a time period there where they're just learning to move. And like, have they already kind of missed that window to properly learn? I had the opportunity to go up and talk to one of the Olympic hurdles coaches, and he talked about how, you know, they look at training kids young because not only does it teach them how to learn it, like it it tells their body how to express DNA differently. So like, yeah, we all have genetics, but like he was saying, like all that research at that Olympic level is showing like if you can get a kid early enough, like I forget the ages, but it was like 8 to
Before
10,
11, yeah.
6 to 10 or something like that. Like you could actually get, even though it might not be, the top level genetics, you can get a
A little more
humans
juice.
genetics to move within its own set to a more athletic build that'll have them succeed throughout life. So it's like it's almost going to be, which it used to be in your age, every kid was athletic, every kid, just by the nature of the way the world was. Now I feel like it's almost going to be a race backwards to see like which training programs and which schools and which communities can reinvigorate their youth, and they're just going to turn into, in 10 years they're going to be superhumans in comparison to the other communities.
Mm-hmm.
I think
Yeah.
about this often. I mean, I do think about that often. It could be a divergence now of those that are going to be athletic and those just that aren't. It's like, not to get too deep philosophically, but this could be a divergence of the human animal, essentially, if you think about it.
Right. Yeah.
So, uh, for me, it's like grade 6 for boys, especially, is huge. And I've been watching my boys these last 2 years. Grade 5, you still get recess. Grade 6, you're expected to come in, go to periods. You're sort of like, of course, it's an indoctrination into a system. And the boys, people would say, oh, these boys act out. It's like, for me personally, they're not really acting out. They're actually they're butting up against something that's just not in their nature. They're just not made to sit down and pay attention. They're still meant to be out on recess. If you put them out on recess, what do they do? What do they want to do? They want to wrestle each other. Many of my 11-year-old, 6th grade boys, 11, 12-year-olds, they just want unstructured time outside to play, which would be frowned upon in an educational setting. I personally don't care if they frown upon it. I'm going to do it. If they don't want me to teach here anymore, it's fine. They can find someone that's going to not do it. But they go outside, they want to wrestle. So wrestling for boys and for men in these other combat sports, this is essential to being the male of the species. This is how we express our true nature. That's why wrestling is such an important sport, and other combat sports. Even men, my age, that are now, eventually they might get into a combat sport because they feel like there's something missing there.
Yeah.
You've raised your kids, you have time and money now to go to a studio and maybe start practicing some sort of martial art or some other combat sport, But these boys, they're just expressing their true nature when they do that. So when they act out, and I know I just said this, but this is an important piece just from stuff that I've observed. Girls are doing much better now in public education, including post-secondary education. And it's going to continue to go this way, where the universities are going to be full of, 75% women. They're much better at settling in, playing the game, getting into the system, and the boys struggle with that. And it's sort of, outside of it, and I like what you said about there's going to be the really athletic kids and the kids that aren't, and this is true. And it's like, thankfully, if you're a knowledgeable parent, you're going to be able to drive some of that also, because a lot of some parents are misled, I think, by the youth sports system, and you end up with kids that have a really high degree of like sports specific skills before they even have basic fundamental movement skills, and they're not powerful kids, and they don't have good posture, and they've never sprinted all out, and they're not in touch with like what it means to actually go all out at something. But they can maybe swing really well at something or whatever, and swing a baseball bat really well or something like that. Whatever these really specific sport movements are, a lot of coaches will focus on that early rather than long-term athletic development. So public education does wonderful things for sport, I think. The support level is amazing. It's like, look, we've all, like, you guys have wonderful support in Shelton. It's amazing. And just about every school I've gone to down here is also, they really support athletics. Physical education is something that it's been backburnered. For some reason, we felt like physical education just should be backburnered when it comes to public education. I think we're doing kids a disservice when we do that.
Yeah, there's a lot of things in education, like a lot of decisions that we've made, and then once you make those decisions, we don't ever go back and revisit them. And in a lot of ways, they're kind of inhumane. And I don't mean like that we're trying to punish people, but they aren't designed with like human needs in mind to start with. Like when my boys started going to school, they'd come home and tell me that they weren't allowed to play tag at recess, that tag is banned on the playground. And I asked their principal about it, and she's like, it causes so many problems. It's all of our fights, it's all of our whatever. And I'm like, yeah, but those are the only times that those kids get to deal with like being honest about when they got tagged and dealing with conflict and learning how to, learning when it's appropriate to be rough and when to be gentle. And like it's not a problem, it's a learning opportunity. And it's really sad to me that it's not something that's embraced as what it is.
Yes. So then you have like somebody's got to pick that learning up.
Mm-hmm.
If we're gonna, eventually you're gonna have to learn that if you're gonna be successful in any sport or in
Right.
life. So it's like where is that now being taught? It's probably being taught by somebody that's been in a position that they never had to think about that. So now they're going like backwards. What are they giving up? It's just this domino effect
Mm-hmm.
of readjusting where things are being taught, where if we just let human nature go, like it was working okay. Not everything was great, but at least in like that
Mm-hmm.
was fine. But like I said, the more intelligent coaches and communities are going to be able to reap the benefit, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's tough, man, because yeah, I agree with you both 100% there about, especially talking about inhumane. It's so true when we're talking about in terms of what human growth and development needs, and what the needs of these young people are, and what Josh said about who's going to figure out smarter, who's going to be smart enough to figure this out. Well, it's like people like you guys are smart enough. We got to start talking. I mean, we need to start talking about this stuff more. And I know there's people talking about it, but public education probably could use some sort of system redesign for sure. Physical education is like, otherwise we're just gonna, like I mentioned before, there's gonna be a divergence of species, I believe, at least. So I know that's like pretty heavy or deep, and people are like, what's this guy like talking about? But yeah, it's like, are we gonna be Homo sapien sapien? Who's gonna do that? And everyone knows, like a couple of generations ago, we were all hinging and lifting and pressing and sprinting and falling out of trees, getting the wind knocked out of us and things like that. So
Any of those PE video from the 70s, and it's just like, what is it? The goddamn Navy SEALs, like all the body types, and it's like, no, this is
Yeah.
is
Right.
just Ford Middle School PE class, climbing fucking ropes,
We're
and
just like doing like a, full on like body
muscle ups, and
muscle
all
up.
shirtless at class, like in
Yes.
class, just sweaty, muscled up,
Yeah,
thin,
so-
like lean dudes.
I'm teaching ecology and agriculture, so I'm interested in animal science, definitely, in human animal science and primates and things like that. So I think there's a lot of problems created by just getting away from our true nature, things that that weren't epidemics before, now epidemics. We're unhealthy generally. It's like we're unhappy and unhealthy as a whole. I'm not talking about us personally, but if you look at the human animal, it's like you can tell we're not thriving. So there needs to be some sort of course correction, I think. There needs to be a course correction to get us back in a healthy state. Some people are saying, "Oh, the good old days weren't so good." Well, in many ways, they were good. You know, they were better for us, and some things that needed to change have changed. So we just need to use the brain that we have to hopefully get us back on track. And I know this isn't necessarily about speed training, but I've just been observing these kids now for my whole my from coaching and observing the kids that I get, and then understanding like kind of where they came from in terms of like physicality and how they moved prior to when I saw them as coaches, to now like having the opportunity to observe middle schoolers, um, especially the boys, have been very informative to me about sort of where we can make some improvements when
Yeah.
it comes to kids.
Well, and I think this kind of conversation also dovetails real well with actually coaching, because there's a lot of things that are done just because it's the way that it was always done. Like I remember, when I was a kid doing sports, they were real big on like static stretching as part of the warm up. And that's kind of been a thing that like the research has been like, that's basically not a good idea most of the time. Like conditionally, yes, but most of the time it just results in reduced power output, reduced maximal strength, and I think I've even seen studies that indicate that it reduces your like proprioception, like how well you recognize where you're at in space. And I never liked doing it. I would always make myself scarce when it was time for the team static stretch, because I was a thrower and I would throw shorter if I stretched first. Like warming up was good, getting your body temperature up was good, moving was good, doing some dynamic stretching was good, but just sitting for half a minute or a minute and stretching out hamstrings just made me slower. And so there's a lot of pieces like that in training that I think that have become like they're so ingrained in what we've been doing that people don't really think about like from the ground up. If I could just start fresh, and I had a whole career to plan out for what my athlete was going to be doing, like what would I actually do at each step of the way? It's the same thing in education. If we could start fresh, I think it would look probably 80 or 90% the same, but that 10% that was different would be remarkably different. Yeah.
Well, it's just the same. The education, like when I go to some visits, I've been blessed to, especially my last head football coach got us to a lot of cool places. Like, we talk about this a lot. Like, there might be an expert that says A, and then just as reputable expert who's had just as much success says B. So it's like, God, it's just such a hard thing. If I've seen really successful, in my line football programs that are like almost all static. A little bit of dynamic, but all static prior to the event. And then you have their other ones that are all dynamic, besides certain athletes that are either feeling tight or have the like injury history that are doing some
Specific stuff for them.
prehab type movements. But it's like, and both of those are run by super successful strength coaches and training staff. And it's like, God, like I know what I've learned and what I believe, but it's hard. It's hard because you have the people that are in front of that are totally off.
And there's so many, we talk about like a team program like that, there's so many variables, right? So like if you were to switch a group from static stretching to dynamic stretching, just as an example, right? Then you might not see any change in performance or injury or anything else because that wasn't really like a key part of the, the volume of their program, right? So it's really, really hard to even like slice and dice that stuff when you're talking about program level decisions.
Yeah. You would think. The first year we went from, when I took over as the head strength coach, we went from static to dynamic. We had 10 times less injuries on the field. Yeah. You know what I mean? Could have been a lot of different factors, but it was like, all right, that was pretty good.
So the factor, it's so interesting, the placebos actually work.
Yeah.
That's been proven. Actually, they work better than a lot of
interventions.
Yeah, exactly. So I learned this like a long time ago. Someone said this and it rang true with me, is that if you believe in the training, even if it's bad training, you're going to perform better than someone that has good training that doesn't believe in it.
Yeah.
So if you think about like the top level of sport, like team sport or whatever, it's a pretty level playing field. Like we're talking like professional sport, like
Right.
NFL. NFL, it's a pretty level playing field. Everyone's got money. There's tons of talent coming out. It's like, who wins? The guys that love each other and the guys that believe in their coach
Yeah.
and that don't question, don't get involved in the questioning and the drama. So there's some high level coaches now that would say, I've always done static stretching. It's at the beginning of practice. I do like dynamic, mobility. One, it's good drills, for like we talked about motor
Movement.
learning.
Yeah.
Yeah, the motor learning piece, that's a good way to teach that's a good way to teach kids the proper range of motion and postures and things like that. But also it's a good way to make an assessment on their like just readiness, the way they move, whether or not they're moving well or whether they're kind of dragging or whatever. So that's interesting about learning because to me, learning is learning. The longer I teach and coach also, learning is learning. Teaching and coaching are basically synonymous to me. Is like it's just the repetitions.
Yeah.
The way I explain it to my middle school is first you got to be able to pay attention. So frickin' pay attention to me just for 5 minutes.
Dial it
You're
in.
not going to learn anything. So that's when I usually say some crazy stuff or whatever, or
Get them back.
cuss or whatever, because they're just like, what? This guy said pissed? Oh, I'm going to tell. So let's go ahead. I don't care. Tell them. But pay attention first and then do the repetitions. I tell them is like just like when you first learn to walk, it's the classic example. Your first steps were very not smooth at all. They were very tenuous, your first steps. You might have taken a step and then stumbled and fell down. Now you just do it without even, you don't think about walking anymore. You just walk from here to there.
Yeah.
So it's the same with same with all cognitive learning and motor learning to me is just like pay attention, do the repetition the right way, and you're going to get better. You're going to learn how to do this stuff. So that's why I like the dynamic warm up too. Every now and for me personally though, I'm old, so now a lot of my runs I'll stop and stretch. It's just like I'm going to stop and stretch at the next kiosk or whatever and do some push-ups. So I do enjoy it. I think static stretching definitely does have a benefit. So.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that it doesn't have any place in your program.
I got you, man.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, we were just talking about this. I don't know if it was on the show, but there was a paper published recently where they talked about static stretch. So there's always been different theories for like what contributes to muscular growth, right? So there was like the hormone hypothesis, and then there's like metabolites, and now it's kind of like the tension model. So like just if your muscles are under tension, they're gonna want to do something to respond to that, assuming it's enough tension for long enough, kind of thing, right? And so somebody organized a study, and I wish I could remember the name of the author because I thought that it sounded remarkably like Machiavellian when I read the study. Like they put people in a calf stretching machine and then just kept them at like a pain scale of like 8 out of 10 for like 40 minutes a day or something crazy. It was a really long period of time.
We talked to Jess about it.
Yeah. And they got pretty good muscle growth out of it, but I was like, I can't imagine just being like strapped into a machine and just being at like as much pain as you can tolerate for a half an hour straight.
I'll do the calf raise. Now, maybe that's what I need with my tiny ass calves. Obviously, I'm not doing the calf raises. Maybe you just need to strap me into a machine or something.
Yeah, but there's lots of, almost
Dude,
everything.
You think they're tiny now, just wait like 20 years when sarcopenia is a thing. So here's the thing about getting older, you guys. I'm only 56, so I'm not that old. But in the last year, my ass has essentially disappeared. So just picture a chimpanzee. They have no glutes.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to it. It's gone. So, and when you talk about calves atrophy too, I noticed that they're gone too. But so the weight room, and I know this, we're getting a little off the tangent here. You talked about cross country being like a lifelong sport you can enjoy. I would argue like lifting weights is probably even more beneficial for lifelong vitality.
Yeah.
There's a running has a shelf life, definitely has a shelf life that I think that resistance training doesn't. Obviously, at high levels, of course, they both, you have declines in both. But I think for me personally, I would have, if I could change anything about where I'm at right now, and I feel pretty good about my fitness right now. I'm pretty healthy right now, and I'm able to like work out most days. When I say work out, it's like most of the time easy. Although the rowing machine is one place I can definitely
Put in some work.
put a toe into the pain cave.
Yeah.
It does it for me.
Put a toe
But
into the pain cave.
at least peek in there. It's just like I'll be in. I'll be in soon. I got to get a
Go
little more
find my
fit.
ass.
Yeah, once I find my ass, is it in there? It's in there. That's where it is. That's where
Fell
my
in.
ass went into the pain cave. It's hiding in there. I just got to go in and get it. But yeah. So yes, resistance training, of course, is like definitely something like lifelong is essential. Like I said, running has a shelf life just because the lower legs just can't handle it. The feet and the lower legs, it has to be in small doses. So I'm only running. I keep thinking I'm gonna like train to get into a race, and I end up running 3 days a week. It's just like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna be able to train to race anything on 3 days a week just because I'll jump on the bike or I'll get on the rowing machine and or
Well, and
lift
I
a
think
few weight.
yeah, and that's a like important part of the conversation is the difference between like endurance training or like when I talk to athletes, I try to separate it into like doing some cardio and doing endurance training
Yeah,
because it's a big continuum, right? Like if you go for a 15-minute walk every day, that's healthy cardio that's going to have an impact on your quality of life, for the rest of your life. But like I start thinking about endurance training when you start getting to that point where you're like am I in an aerobic zone for, like 45 minutes at a session or whatever, right? Like when you start getting into like the either longer or more intense training kind of volumes, like it does exist on a continuum. So, for you, like doing the cardio is 3 days a week, right? And maybe the endurance training isn't as much of a
yeah.
option.
I guess separating out like muscular endurance would be a whole other like piece of that. So
Right.
people that run, the good marathoners or the good, half marathoners or whatever, just have this tremendous like muscular endurance.
Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing is about wrestling. I'm gonna I'll bring it back to wrestling for you guys
All
because
right.
this was something on my mind because I know youth and high school wrestling. I've always been a little bit alarmed at like when it's time to cut, and I understand like the reason to cut for sure. But I think it also like butts up against, and I know this is why you guys have like are starting a nutrition company because this is a concern of you also because I think cutting, let's face it, like there's many parts of sport that are no longer healthy. We're
Mm-hmm.
talking about performance, we're talking about trying to win. So you sometimes sacrifice short-term health. Well, just like endurance runners, the endurance runners, we don't want any extra weight. Like when you're coaching endurance runners, you don't want any extra weight. You're going to be better the lighter you are, right? So typically coaching like youth endurance runners, especially, well, both men and women, uh, during the time of high school, they put on weight naturally. You're supposed to put on weight. Men put on weight, muscle, more muscle. Women put on more fat. They can certainly put on muscle, but just as a course of nature, it's just a time when you're putting on weight. So the like endurance training is rife with eating disorders. I'm not sure if wrestling has a lot of disordered eating also, although it's a concern. Like for me as an endurance coach, it's always a concern when kids are freaking out because they're getting heavy. They used to be faster. When I was a freshman, I was much faster. I'm 20 pounds heavier now, and I'm not as fast as I used to be. So I remember I grew up, I had some friends that wrestled and things like that, and there was always some crazy stuff that was happening. It was like trying to cut weight. And I know endurance runners do it too. It's called disordered eating in some cases because they typically do it over a longer period of time rather than just like a short window. So I never could reconcile like it being healthy for a kid that's supposed to grow to keep trying to move down. get lighter when, your body is screaming at you, just like, I need to grow now, or I need to get bigger. So I think in terms of like endurance running and wrestling, there's definitely a correlation there for both, because they're both weight dependent sports, even though there's not weight classes in endurance running. It matters. The weight matters. That's why we don't. Everyone always said, "Oh, runners shouldn't weight lift because it'll make you too heavy." It's like, no, we just don't lift for hypertrophy.
Right.
We need to be strong. We need to lift and not get bigger. I imagine wrestling's the same way, right? It's like you want to lift, but you don't want to lift for hypertrophy because you want to be as like strong as you can, but at a lower weight.
Right. At that frame.
Right.
Yeah, I have seen, and maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I have seen runners who, they would benefit from being a little bigger and stronger, or who tried to get too small. Like famously, who was the girl that ran for Nike and it turned into a great big debacle 5-10 years ago? Chelsea something. Do you remember that?
I feel like girls that have tried to run for Nike debacles, there's like so many we could like refer to.
We just lost a sponsor.
It,
Oh no.
no,
Anyway,
no,
yeah,
it is a debacle. I'm saying
yeah, yeah,
the whole body. So when it comes to like just losing weight, even like, look, even there's collegiate men are like not eating properly so they can be as lean as possible.
yeah.
So when
And
you're
I,
trying to get a performance edge, and that's why else would you cut weight in a sport that's a weight sport unless you're trying to get a performance edge?
yeah,
Like that's
yeah,
what you're trying to do. So you're manipulating your body to try to get a performance edge, and you're doing that by restricting. Essentially, there's not too many ways to do it. Really, is like this is where pretty simple, just general science. It's like consume fewer calories.
yeah, yeah. But
Than burn.
I've certainly seen people in my time who were chasing that lighter weight, even in endurance sports, who got too light. They started to get slower because they were too small. They
This is
didn't.
yeah, it happens. I mean, I don't know if that happens in wrestling, just because I'm not really. I guess I've never invested. Wrestling's a fascinating sport. I think wrestling is probably one of the most difficult. I'd say wrestling, in terms of like sports that a high school kid would do or a collegian, wrestling has to be up there with the most difficult physical challenge for sure. Plus, it's the one-on-one nature, like the one-on-one combat nature is extremely difficult. Watch a couple middle school kids wrestle for 5 minutes. They come out just beat red, hair, a little bit of blood. Jordans are scuffed. They don't care. But so yeah, wrestling has to be one of the most difficult sports. And I'll say this too, I think another one of the most difficult sports is the field events in track and field, just because of you only get 3 trials. So if you mess up the first trial, it's like, ooh,
Hmm.
then everything just zooms in closer. So the pressure just gets ratcheted up, so there's just a lot of pressure in both of those events. I don't know what the other difficult sports are. Cross country is a difficult sport because it's really, really distressing. Like as soon as the gun goes off, you're like in distress in like 30 seconds,
Uh
And
huh.
then it's like, if you're a man, you're running 10K,
Yeah.
So if you're an old man, you're looking at like, I got 35 more minutes of trying to manage this distress. So it's difficult in that way, I think,
Hmm.
for sure. So, but yeah, the wrestling, I'm fascinated to just hopefully I can sort out someday in my mind. It's just like how that can be, managed, like the cutting the weight and trying to get the performance edge. You guys probably know already, but I'm just not up on that. I know how I do it in endurance sports. In endurance sports, I just say, look, like we'll talk about high school girls in particular. This is typically how it plays out when it comes to body weight, because how much you weigh it plays a huge factor in running economy. You're faster when you're lighter, all things considered, especially over distance. But a girl will be really good as an 8th or ninth grader, and everyone will like shower that athlete with accolades, and then body will change by nature and it gets slower, and everyone will be like, "What happened?" Some people that will know, and this is just a classic example. It happens again and again though. but the girl herself might freak out. And then of course that's when like she'll start to, because she knows she's larger, it's harder to run, so she'll start consuming fewer calories. So I think the conversation, like just having a conversation with the athlete and the parents or other coaches up front, saying, look, this, your body's, you're going to get larger. You're just at a period of your life where you're meant to get larger. It's like that's what we want. We want you to get larger. Men, we want you to put on more muscle right now. We want you to get taller. We want you to put on more muscle. Women, we want you to get ready because you're going to be in your childbearing years. This is like what we're meant to do. So just having those conversations up front, then it's like, look, we just got to be patient.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to be patient because what we're going to do is you're going to get bigger, but what we're going to do is we're going to make you stronger
Mm-hmm.
so you can actually manage that weight. And once you're stronger, you're going to be even better than you were before. So
Yeah. Not seeing it as a single variable thing, right? Like you can get stronger, you can get more skilled, you can get faster. There's a lot of dials that you can
these things
turn.
just take time.
Yeah.
They just take time because when you're a young child, you're good. You can be good. You can apply a little bit of training, like endurance training, to a middle schooler or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and they can be really good. They weigh 90 pounds. It's
Right.
like this a world-class marathoner weighs that. Like a world-class female marathoner weighs like 100 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
And the men weigh 120. That's like what a middle schooler weighs. So they can be really good, but maybe they don't have that kind of body type where they're going to remain 90, or maybe they'll get back down there, after they're just completely zero body fat years down the road or whatever.
Yeah. Again, making that sacrifice that you talked about, right? Like trading the long-term health consequences for the short-term performance. Yeah.
I'm just trying to envision my body at 120.
Yeah,
I
that's
might have to
interesting to
lose a
think
couple
about.
people's asses to fucking get down to.
What?
I'm trying to
When
get to
when did
210.
you weigh 120? Cofield?
The
Yeah, do you
last time
remember?
I weighed 120 pounds, I was in third
Birth?
grade. Yeah,
Third grade, yeah, wild.
Yeah. I had a funny, this is a fun story, but my so at the school they did like well child checks, every year at the end of every school year. And so I actually have my records. In my fourth grade well child check, I was 4'9" and 165 pounds. And my fifth grade well child check, I was 5'11" and 165 pounds. So I grew 14 inches in a year. Broke everything.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah. It was pretty fun. It was a good time. But yeah, it's been a long time since I've been 120.
I was like 169 in the Army. They were at the end of basic. And I see photos of that. It's not good. 169 is not a good weight for me. Like,
No.
it's terrible. I look like a skeleton. But guess what? That's the fastest I ever ran.
Exactly. Yeah.
So-
So I remember just coaching in high school and being distressed when wrestlers would cut weight, just because I was ignorant mainly, just ignorant about the whole thing.
Well,
And-
yeah, there's also a lot of craziness about the way, like, almost everybody that we've talked to about losing weight is like, hey, a half a pound a week or maybe up to 2 pounds a week. And then you'll see kids trying to do 10, or something crazy. And it's
Well,
like,
yeah, and they're like definitely over the last 2 years, the more I've dug into, like there are definitely some kids that lose some weight that are perfectly fine. They lost a little bit of body fat. They're still well within their growth numbers.
mhm,
There's some kids that are wrestling that are going up in weight. There's some kids that are just in their weight class. Like it's not everybody.
right.
And that's another thing. Like when we started this company, like I'm not trying. The answer to this is not to solve, like to convince wrestlers to stop cutting weight. It's like you said, John. Like that is in their heads and out. Like it's going to increase the outcome of winning.
Hmm.
Therefore, as humans, we're not going to change that. That's going to be there unless there was some overarching change of rules. So instead of trying to like lean against that, let's just educate them of what it could be going on,
Yeah.
and then try to come up with products that allow them to still take the journey to a lower weight class while making sure that they're getting as much nutrients, instead of just water, salt, and exercise. Like, let's make sure that you're actually fueled up for those events.
Yeah.
For as much.
Yeah, I think that just getting back to physical education, I think I don't know about you guys, but I know like when I'm at my optimum weight, I know when I'm there. I can just feel it. And I think a kid just might not know what their optimum weight is just because they don't have the experience or they didn't have the education about understanding, what feel like it's just like sleeping. It's like a lot of kids don't sleep enough. They don't even know what it feels like to be rested, or hydrated.
Right.
People in general like are chronically dehydrated, especially like the American teenager, really dehydrated, probably sleep deprived. Their circadian rhythms are probably a little bit askew. Not all kids, of course, not all kids are like checking their phone in the middle of the night, but most are. And it's like I know they are because sometimes I check mine in the middle of the night when I wake up. So I think that a lot of them just don't know like what it feels like to feel good or be fueled properly or be rested properly. I know they have an idea. It's like, oh, I feel good today. It's well, maybe it's because you slept. But I think just that's why I think physical education is another just could come play a huge role.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's the big thing, right? As coaches, it's kind of our responsibility to show them, right?
Yeah.
Like get them engaged in the process and get them to the point where they know they can understand,
Yeah.
because you can tell them till you're blue in the face, but it doesn't mean as much,
I love when it clicks though, when it clicks for them, and then they're just like, well, they take ownership. When people take ownership, it's just awesome.
Yeah.
They start sleeping, they start sleeping at night. So
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, you know what's not great for sleep patterns?
Starting businesses.
Starting a business in the middle of having
A
a full-time job.
podcasting business with like lights shining on you,
Oh
like
man.
LEDs. You
Yeah.
guys have lights up? Is there
Oh,
lights
yeah.
in front of
Oh
you?
yeah, there's
Yeah.
yeah.
Man,
Nuclear.
it'll pay off, you guys.
Yeah, I
It's
hope
gonna
so.
be good. It
You know,
already
John,
is.
it already has.
Yeah.
Even if for whatever reason we had to quit today, like the conversations that we've had in the 11 episodes, your episode 11, well, your episode 12, we just messed up on that one. It's already paid off. So like if we can continue having these conversations, like just as a coach, like if I just stayed in the line of coaching, like
Mm-hmm.
hearing from other coaches has been rejuvenating, and we've learned. And so,
Yeah, I think that you need I think that this is part of like the human condition again, talking about living in a silo, is that like sometimes you're in the system that you're in and you don't realize how much different it could be, or like what you could do, like what autonomy and authority you've actually got over it. And just by like reaching out to some other people and having that conversation, like it really is like I even like you were saying, just my own work feels better having somebody else's perspective about what I can and can't do, things I can try out, and ways to think about the world and stuff.
Yeah, the main thing is like for me is just like continuous learning
Mm-hmm.
and growing just because I'm curious. I'm curious, I love people. I just learning and growing continuously is like a big part of my life. So it's
Yeah.
awesome to be able to. I can also say that I've never said no to a podcast, but I've only been asked on one. So
Hey man,
well,
well, people
I
start.
do miss I miss coaching at a high school level. Love coaching the high school.
Yeah.
Coaching down here is fun. Coaching middle school is fun. Last year I didn't have to coach very much.
Yeah.
I just had some kids that were just incredible, man. It's like, and then this year is a little bit different. I have different athletes, but it's just a lot of just encouragement and aerobic work and tying their shoe and stuff like that. So it's just
yeah,
not
and
the
that's, I
same.
mean, the not only the kid to coach relationship, but coach to coach relationship is definitely one of the more rewarding things. Like I often
Uh-huh.
think about, I think I was just telling, so if people don't know, John's daughter, Sarah, is my coworker. So, we were just talking about, I'll not say the events just in case some random parent is listening, but me and John were timing. We were the finish line for some races, and the timing system was messing up. So we were just walking down like, yeah.
Just giving them a
Kyle
mark.
got 102. Josh, you were 103.
So yeah, so the watch is, I've told Kit you can manipulate. It's just like the placebo
Uh-huh.
or whatever. But sometimes, I messed up a lot of stopwatches. Just say a number or whatever. It's just, another good one. That was awesome. While you were spacing off, he's like, "Is that an osprey over there? What is that? What does he got? Is that a fish?" But
Oh, yeah. Listen. Oh, 1 second off your best. Try again.
Yeah.
so I miss that. I'm going to get back into probably coaching high school, I hope. This is super fun over here. I miss coaching high school though. So kind of
Yeah.
looking around. It's like talking to you guys gets me kind of fired up because I haven't
Yeah.
really thought about training as much as I used to. It used to be such a huge part of my life, but more into I think psychology is more fascinating to me now. So,
Yeah. Well, we've had
but
quite a few conversations about, the idea of building the team and building the kid to be a good person, and the training is secondary, and I can't fault that,
man,
view
it's
Yeah.
at all,
the relationships are like there's a kid that wrestled. Nathan Morgan wrestled at Shelton High. It was also I don't know if you know Nathan.
I don't know. It's
I
not
don't,
ringing a
He's
I don't
bell.
also
know the name,
he's
but
also an athlete. So when I was down at the alternative high school, this kid showed up. He'd been homeschooled. I think he was in remedial reading or something, but just a really interesting guy. And he grew up at Lake Cushman. His dad is like the primary builder of the Mount Eleanor Trail. So Nathan wrestled. He's got this mountain face. And I'd been snowboarding with him. But anyways, he became an engineer. He ended up getting a track scholarship at St. Martin's. The guy overthought everything and finally let go at like senior year. Wrestling, he was always hurt. He has a lot of injuries. I mean, I don't know if there's a lot of injuries in wrestling, but there seems to be. It's combat, so there seems to be some
Yeah, there's going to be aches and sprains.
opportunity there. But anyway, he ended up finally just like shutting his brain down long enough to like run like a 424 1600, a good 1600. Got him a track scholarship at St. Martin's, partially. Got an engineering degree out of there. Moved to like a yurt on some mountaintop in Wyoming uh, as a internship for the federal government, where he parlayed that into a full-time career. He rappels off dams
Okay.
and tests like the core, like does core tests on the dams and other structures. Lives in Idaho. He's turned into this fantastic, and I talk to this, me and him, like I talk to him all the time, but so he'll send me some random text. He's a really funny dude, and of course I'll reply with some sarcastic random thing back. But he's turned himself into this fantastic endurance athlete. He's being coached by one of the best endurance coaches in the United States. He does crazy, like he pulled a sled in Wyoming in the winter, like 100 miler. We had to pull a sled. One year he did it on skis. One year he did it on foot. And he's starting to podium at these big, just insane mountain races.
Yeah.
But part of that was like just being around Coach Lacey was a part of his story, definitely. And then being around me for sure. I know he's had an impact on me, and I've had a big impact on him. But what you guys have been around long enough, where it's like, I mean, how lucky are we where there's all these people, that are going on to do just wonderful things. Whether could just be, being a wonderful parent or employer, like chasing their dreams or whatever. But just to get feedback from these people is pretty sweet, I think.
Yeah. 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 It's wonderful.
yeah, it's definitely the best part about coaching for sure.
Yeah.
Seeing the successes of your kids.
Yeah.
Next week is I'm going to see a Shelton kid next week in Gainesville at NAIA Indoor Track Nationals is in Gainesville. Down in Gainesville, that's where the University of Florida is.
Yeah.
Of course, not a bad track school, but the county actually built a wonderful world-class indoor track there.
Hmm.
In fact, World Masters Athletics Championship is happening this year in Gainesville, but NAIA National Indoor Tracks, and a Shelton graduate is going to be racing the 3000 there, at least the 3000. So that's on
Ooh.
Friday. Super stoked.
Who's that?
Get to go. That's Alana Karstens.
Okay, that's
Oh,
what I was
sweet.
hearing. Yeah, awesome
She
kid.
Yeah.
she won the marathon, the NAIA marathon, and now she's having a good indoor track season. So
Where is
that'll be
she at
fun.
now?
What's that?
Where is she at now?
She's at the Evergreen State College.
Okay,
She's
yeah,
a
yeah.
Gooey Duck, which happens to be my alma mater.
Me too.
Go Gooey Ducks, go!
Do you
And
know the fight song?
I know the fight song. You guys know
I
the
don't.
fight song?
Gooey ducks.
I don't know the
Slither
fight.
through the
In
mud.
the mud and sand, let's go.
Oh, that was pretty
Siphon
close.
high when the tide is low. Swivel all about. Let it all hang out. That's actually the motto too. Let it all hang out.
Oh man,
So
that's great.
think that
Yep.
might be the show right there.
That's a good way to end right there.